I stood in the hospital corridor, my wedding dress crumpled and stained, watching through the glass as my mother took her last breath. Alone, without me, without the daughter she'd raised with trembling hands and fierce love, because I'd been sitting in a restaurant for 3 hours, texting frantically, calling repeatedly, waiting for a man who never came. Jake hadn't forgotten. I knew that now, in this moment of crystalline clarity, as the machines flatlined. He simply hadn't cared enough. And in choosing him over rushing to her bedside when my father called, in believing his promise that he was just running late, I had made the worst choice of my life. My father emerged from the room, aged a decade in a single night. He looked at me in my white dress, the dress I'd been wearing for our surprise courthouse wedding that was supposed to happen this morning before the evening reception, and something broke in his eyes. "She kept asking for you," he said quietly. "Right until the end." I opened my mouth, but no sound came. What could I say? That I'd chosen my fiancé's feelings over my dying mother's last moments? That I'd believed Jake when he said his car broke down, even as hour after hour ticked past? That even when Dad called, voice cracking, saying, "It's time, she's asking for you," I'd waited 20 more minutes because Jake had texted, "I'm almost there, please wait"? My phone buzzed. "Jake. Sorry, babe. Got caught up at work drinks. Can we reschedule, maybe next weekend?" Work drinks. My mother was dead, and he'd been at work drinks. I felt something crack inside my chest, a clean snap like a bone breaking. Then the world went white. When I opened my eyes, I was 16 years old, lying in my childhood bedroom, morning light streaming through pink curtains I'd begged my mother to replace for years. My hands were small, unmarked by the engagement ring I'd worn in another life. My phone, an ancient iPhone 6, showed the date, June 15th, 2015. I sat up slowly, memories of 2 lives warring in my head. In my first life, this was the summer I met Jake. I was 16, he was 19, working at the country club where my family had a membership. He was handsome, charming, and he made me feel special. We dated in secret that first summer because my parents wouldn't approve of the age gap. By the time I was 18 and we went public, I was so thoroughly his that I couldn't see what everyone else saw. That Jake Mitchell was a taker who'd found the perfect giver. I'd spent 9 years with him, 9 years rearranging my life around his schedule, his needs, his dreams. I'd turned down a scholarship to UCLA because he didn't want long distance. I'd worked 2 jobs to support us through his entrepreneur phase while he burned through my savings on failed ventures. I'd skipped family dinners, missed my brother's graduation, canceled on my parents 100 times because Jake needed me. And when my mother was dying, when she had hours left, he'd been at work drinks and couldn't be bothered to answer my calls. In that first life, I'd spent 2 years after her death in a fog of grief and guilt. Jake had been supportive in the way a paper umbrella is waterproof, present but useless. We'd married anyway because I'd already sent the invitations and I couldn't face disappointing anyone else. The marriage lasted 4 miserable years before I finally found the strength to leave. By then, my father had remarried and moved to Arizona. My brother barely spoke to me, and I was 30, alone, and starting over with nothing. But now I was 16 again, and I knew exactly what was coming. Downstairs, I could hear my mother humming in the kitchen. Mom, alive, healthy. She wouldn't get her diagnosis for another 6 years. I had time. I had so much time. And I knew exactly what I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to meet Jake Mitchell. The revelation was like cold water, shocking and clarifying. That was my advantage. Not some magical power, not a supernatural gift, just knowledge. Perfect, terrible knowledge of how badly I could destroy my own life if I made the same choices. My phone rang. Unknown number. I knew who it was before I answered. Sarah Chen, my best friend from high school. In my first life, Sarah and I had drifted apart during college because Jake hadn't liked how much time I spent with her. She tried to warn me about him, and I'd chosen him over our friendship. "Hey," Sarah's voice was bright and young. "My cousin got us jobs at the country club for the summer. Pool attendants. It's not glamorous, but the tips are amazing and we'll be tan by August. You in?" In my first life, I'd said yes. That's where I met Jake. He was the assistant events coordinator, 3 years older, confident and funny. He'd brought me lemonade on my break, complimented my smile, made me feel seen. By the end of summer, I was in love. I can't, I said. My mom needs help with the garden this summer. We're redoing the whole backyard. Since when do you care about gardening? Since now, I softened my tone. But let's hang out constantly anyway? Movie nights, beach days, all of it? Sarah laughed. Obviously, that's the whole point of summer. After we hung up, I sat on my bed, trembling. It was done. The first domino I'd chosen not to tip. I wouldn't be at the country club. I wouldn't meet Jake. That entire nightmare timeline was erased with one simple no. But it wasn't enough to just avoid him. I knew myself. I knew that teenage loneliness, that hunger for romance. If I didn't meet Jake, I might meet someone else just like him. I needed to build a different life, a better foundation. I went downstairs. Mom was making pancakes, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, reading glasses perched on her nose as she consulted a recipe on her iPad. She was only 43. In 7 years, she'd be gone. But not if I could help it. Mom, I said, and my voice caught. I wrapped my arms around her from behind, pressing my face into her shoulder. Whoa, good morning to you too, she laughed, but her arms came up to squeeze mine. What's this about? Nothing, just love you. Love you too, sweetie. Hungry? I was starving. In my first life, I'd been obsessed with being thin for Jake, always worried he'd find someone prettier. I'd skipped breakfast more often than not. Now I ate 3 pancakes and actually tasted them. Dad came down in his business casual, briefcase in hand. David Kim, accountant and devoted father. In my first life, our relationship had deteriorated over the years as I chose Jake over family again and again. By the time Mom died, there was a wall between us I'd never managed to break down. Big summer plans? He asked, ruffling my hair as he passed. Actually, I was thinking I could help with the gardening Mom wants to do, and maybe, could you teach me about accounting? Like the basics of managing money? Dad paused mid-coffee pour and turned to stare at me. Really? Really? I want to understand the finances, investments, savings, all of it. I would love that, Dad said, and his smile was so genuine it hurt. We'll start this weekend. That summer, I didn't meet Jake Mitchell. Instead, I spent lazy days helping Mom plant roses and hydrangeas, learning that I actually enjoyed the meditative work of gardening. I spent evenings with Dad learning about compound interest and tax-advantaged accounts and the importance of financial independence. I spent nights with Sarah and our friends, being a normal teenager. I also studied. In my first life, I'd been a B student, too distracted by Jake to really focus. Now I had purpose. I needed scholarships, needed college far from here, needed a career that would support me. I started junior year like a woman possessed, joining debate team and math club, actually reading the assigned books instead of skimming SparkNotes. What happened to you? My brother Matt asked one night, watching me work through calculus problems. He was 13, all elbows and attitude. In my first life, we'd barely maintained a relationship. I'd missed his high school graduation for a trip Jake planned. I'd forgotten his birthday 3 years in a row. By the time I tried to rebuild that bridge, he was in college across the country and wanted nothing to do with me. I decided to care, I said simply. Hey, want help with your English essay? You hate English. I hate bad grades. Come on, let me look at it. We stayed up until midnight working on his paper about To Kill a Mockingbird. When it came back with an A, he actually hugged me. Small moments. That's what I'd missed in my first life. Small, precious moments that built into a foundation of love. Senior year, Jake Mitchell's name came up exactly once. Sarah mentioned that her cousin said the hot events guy had been fired for sleeping with a country club member's daughter. The girl was 17, he was 21 by son. Then, my blood ran cold. In my first life, I'd been that 17-year-old, except I'd thought it was special, romantic, forbidden. I'd thought he loved me, but I'd just been one in a pattern. Gross, Sarah said, not noticing my expression. Apparently her parents threatened to press charges. He got fired and the club hushed it up. Without me there, he'd found another girl, another target. I felt sick thinking of her, hoping she escaped faster than I had. I graduated third in my class, got a full ride to UC Berkeley for economics. Dad cried at graduation. Mom threw me a party and invited everyone we knew. Matt made a dorky speech about his genius sister that made everyone laugh. College was different the second time around. I'd been so isolated in my first life, calling Jake every night, flying home every holiday to see him instead of making real friends. Now I joined study groups, went to campus events, actually lived. I dated casually, nothing serious. Every time a guy started giving me that familiar feeling, that intensity that felt like love but was really control, I ended it. I was learning to recognize red flags early. The ones who wanted all my time, who got jealous of my friends, who made jokes at my expense, then claimed I couldn't take a joke. I learned what healthy looked like, and I learned to like myself enough to demand it. Junior year, I spent a semester abroad in Tokyo. In my first life, Jake had talked me out of it. A whole semester without seeing each other? That's basically breaking up. So I'd stayed, worked at his failed startup for free, made myself small. Now I walked through Shinjuku at night, neon lights reflecting off wet pavement, completely free. I ate ramen at 2 a.m. with my host family. I practiced Japanese until my tongue ached. I dated a graduate student named Kenji for a few weeks before we amicably agreed we wanted different things. It was easy, light, fun. Mom and Dad visited for a week. We toured temples and gardens, stayed up late drinking sake and laughing. Mom was 49, healthy, vibrant. We had time. Except we didn't. It was spring of my senior year when Mom called me, voice steady but wrong somehow. "Sweetheart, I need to tell you something." The diagnosis was stage 3 ovarian cancer. Aggressive but caught earlier than in my first timeline. She'd gone in for a routine checkup, something she'd skipped in my first life because she'd been planning my wedding to Jake instead. "You're going to beat this," I told her fiercely. I'm coming home." "You're not dropping out of college." "I'm not. I have 1 semester left and most of my classes are online. I can finish from home." I moved back into my childhood room, spent mornings at classes, afternoons driving Mom to chemo, evenings doing homework while she slept. Dad and I became a well-oiled machine of care and support. Matt flew home from Boston every weekend. It was brutal. Some days Mom was too sick to get out of bed. She lost her beautiful hair, lost weight, lost the energy that had always defined her. But she fought, and we fought with her. During one late-night conversation, while I was helping her through a bout of nausea, she grabbed my hand. "I'm so proud of who you've become," she whispered. "So proud." "Mom, let me finish. I know we don't know what's going to happen. But if this is it, I need you to know you made every right choice. The scholarship, studying what you loved, staying close to family. You chose yourself, and that made me so happy." I was crying too hard to respond. In my first life, she'd died disappointed in me, knowing I'd wasted years on a man who didn't value me. Now she was proud. That changed everything. Mom survived. The cancer went into remission after 8 months of hell. She was weak, exhausted, but alive. We celebrated her remission at the same hospital where, in another life, I'd watched her die in a wedding dress. I graduated Berkeley that spring, summa cum laude, got recruited by 3 major firms and chose the one in San Francisco, close enough to visit every weekend, far enough to have my own life. At 25, I was a financial analyst making 6 figures, living in a sleek apartment in Soma with 2 roommates I actually liked. I was happy, genuinely, surprisingly happy. That's when I saw him again. I was at a networking event for young professionals, wine in hand, making small talk with a venture capitalist about market trends. And across the room, I saw Jake Mitchell. He'd aged. Not badly, but he was 31 now, and the boyish charm was starting to fade. He wore an ill-fitting suit and laughed too loud at his companion's jokes. I watched him work the room, that familiar pattern: identify target, approach with confidence, dominate conversation, collect contact info, move on. He hadn't changed at all. Our eyes met across the room. He paused, clearly trying to place me. I looked different, professional, confident, expensive haircut, tailored dress. Not the teenager he'd manipulated. He started walking over. I could have left. Should have left. but some petty part of me wanted this moment. "Hi," he said, flashing that smile that had once made me weak. "I'm Jake Mitchell. Have we met?" "No," I said simply. We haven't." "You look so familiar." "I have one of those faces." I sipped my wine. "What do you do, Jake?" He launched into his pitch. He was between ventures, had some exciting projects in development, was really focusing on building his network right now. Translation: unemployed and looking for his next mark. "And you?" he asked, finally. "I'm a financial analyst at Morrison & Way." His eyes lit up. "Really? That's fantastic. You know, I'm actually looking for investors for my current project. Revolutionary app concept. Maybe we could grab coffee. I could walk you through the pitch deck." Of course. Of course he was looking for money. "I don't invest in apps," I said. "But good luck." I started to walk away. "Wait," he said, and something in his voice snagged. "You really look familiar. Did you grow up around here? Maybe. Did you ever go to the Valley Oaks Country Club?" I turned back. "No, I spent that summer gardening with my mother." Confusion flickered across his face. For just a moment, I let myself wonder if on some quantum level he remembered. If there was some part of him that knew he'd lost something he never even got to destroy. Then I smiled. "Excuse me, I see someone I need to talk to." I walked away and didn't look back. Life continued, bright and full. I got promoted to senior analyst at 27. Started my own investment consulting firm at 29. Made partner at 31. Bought a house in Oakland with a garden I actually maintained. Mom, cancer-free for 7 years, helped me plant roses. I dated. Some relationships lasted months, one lasted nearly 2 years. They ended for normal reasons: incompatibility, different life goals, gradual drifting. Nothing dramatic, no betrayals, just life. At 33, I met Daniel at a charity fundraiser. He was a pediatric surgeon, kind and funny, with warm eyes and an actual, genuine interest in my work. We talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him. "Full disclosure," I said. "I'm really close with my family. Sunday dinners with my parents are non-negotiable. My brother and his wife just had a baby, and I'm that aunt who shows up with excessive gifts. If that's not your scene." "Are you kidding?" Daniel laughed. "I'm Indian. Family dinners are coded into my DNA. My mom's already going to adopt you." We dated for a year before meeting each other's families. Not because we were hiding anything, but because we wanted to be sure. When I finally brought him home for Sunday dinner, Mom pulled me aside. "He looks at you like you're the whole world," she whispered. "But more importantly, you look at him like he's a partner, not a project." "I learned from the best," I said, squeezing her hand. Daniel proposed on a beach in Maui, simple and perfect. "I know you don't need me," he said. "You've built an amazing life all on your own, but I'd really like to be part of it if you'll have me." "Yes," I said, and meant it. We got married on a sunny Saturday in my parents' garden, surrounded by everyone we loved. Mom, cancer-free for 9 years, cried through the whole ceremony. Dad walked me down the aisle. Matt was Daniel's best man and gave a speech about how I'd helped him with his Mockingbird essay 20 years ago, and he'd been trying to return the favor ever since. Sarah was my maid of honor. "You know what I love most?" she said in her speech. "You never lost yourself, not for anyone. And now you found someone who loves exactly who you are." My phone buzzed during the reception. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me check. It was a Facebook message. Request from Jake Mitchell. "Hey," it read, "saw your wedding announcement in the paper. Congrats. I know this is random, but I've been doing a lot of therapy and working on myself. I wanted to apologize if I was ever less than respectful when we dated. I'm trying to make amends with people from my past. Hope you're well." When we dated. We'd never dated, not in this life. I stared at the message for a long moment, trying to understand. Then it hit me. He'd found someone else. Some other girl from that summer, and he'd treated her badly enough that his therapist made him reach out to apologize. but he couldn't even remember which girl he was apologizing to. He'd sent a generic message, probably copied and pasted to multiple women, hoping one would respond and give him the absolution he wanted. I deleted the message without responding. Daniel found me a few minutes later, looking at my phone. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said, and meant it. I slipped my phone into my purse and took his hand. "Dance with me?" We danced as the sun set, my family around us, my future bright and mine. I never thought about Jake Mitchell again. The years unfolded like a gift I'd forgotten to expect. Daniel and I bought a Victorian in Berkeley and spent weekends renovating it together, arguing cheerfully about paint colors and fighting over whose turn it was to deal with the ancient plumbing. I made partner at my firm. Daniel became chief of pediatric surgery at Children's Hospital. We were busy, successful, and somehow still made time for Sunday dinners at my parents'. Mom's cancer came back when I was 36. Stage 4 this time, already metastasized. "We caught it early last time because of you," she told me in the oncologist's office, holding my hand. "Because you came home. I got 7 extra years because of you." "You're getting more than 7 years," I said fiercely. "You're getting 20, 30. She didn't, but she got 3 more. And they were good years. Years of being Grandma Elaine to Matt's twins. Years of watching me build my business into something real. Years of sitting in her garden, the one we'd built together that long ago summer, and talking about everything and nothing. When she died, it was at home, surrounded by family. Me, Dad, Matt, Daniel, the twins. She was 66 years old. In my first life, she'd been 53 and alone except for a nurse. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered to me in one of our last conversations. "You built such a beautiful life." "We built it together," I told her. "That summer we gardened, that changed everything for me." She smiled, confused but happy. "I always loved that summer." At her funeral, I gave the eulogy. Talked about her strength, her love, her endless patience with a teenage daughter learning to garden. I didn't cry until the end when I said, "She taught me that the best things grow slowly, with care and attention. That you can't rush blooms, but you can be there. Every day doing the work, she taught me to tend my own garden, and because of that, I got to tend hers in return." Dad held my hand through the whole service. Afterward, during the reception, he pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I don't know how to explain it, but sometimes I feel like I got a second chance with you. Like there's another version of our relationship that went wrong, and somehow we avoided it." My breath caught. "Dad, I know that sounds crazy, but that summer you decided to stay home and garden, everything changed. You became so present. And I got to really know my daughter. I got to be proud of you every single day instead of—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Instead of whatever the alternative was." I hugged him tight. "I love you, Dad." "Love you too, kiddo." Life continued. The business grew. Daniel and I celebrated our 10th anniversary with a trip back to Maui. I made Forbes' 40 under 40 list at 39. Matt's twins started calling me Auntie Money because I kept showing up with increasingly ridiculous gifts. I was 41 when I saw the news. "Local man arrested for financial fraud," the headline read. I almost scrolled past. It wasn't my area. I didn't do criminal finance. But something made me click. Jake Mitchell, 47, was arrested yesterday on multiple counts of wire fraud and investment scheme violations. Mitchell allegedly solicited investments for various fake startup ventures over the past 15 years, defrauding investors of an estimated $2.3 million. Authorities say Mitchell targeted women he met through dating apps and professional networking events, building romantic or professional relationships before soliciting investments. When confronted, Mitchell reportedly claimed he was helping people get in on ground floor opportunities. There was a photo. Jake, at 47, looked rough, balding, overweight, with the desperate eyes of a man who'd run out of options. Nothing like the charming 21-year-old I'd fallen for in another lifetime. I read the full article. 15 years of cons, dozens of victims. The investigation had been ongoing for 3 years, and it was one of his ex-girlfriends who'd finally reported him. She'd lost her entire savings, $80,000, to one of his schemes. In my first life, that could have been me. Would have been me, probably. How much money had I given him over the years? How many business opportunities had I funded? I'd lost count. But in this life, I'd never given him a cent. Never gave him my number. Never let him into my world. I'd chosen myself instead. I closed the article and looked around my office. Corner suite, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. Photos on my desk. Daniel and me on our anniversary, Mom's last birthday party, the twins' school play. Partnership agreement framed on the wall. My phone rang. Daniel. Hey, he said. I know you're busy, but Matt just called. The twins have a soccer game this weekend, and apparently we're required to attend? Obviously we're attending. I already bought matching team jerseys for us. Of course you did. I could hear his smile. Love you. Love you too. After we hung up, I sat for a moment thinking about paths not taken. About the girl I'd been in that first timeline. So desperate to be loved that I'd accepted crumbs and called it a feast. About the woman I'd become instead, when I'd chosen differently. That weekend, Daniel and I sat on metal bleachers cheering way too loudly for 6-year-olds playing soccer. The twins were terrible. All the kids were, mostly running in a chaotic swarm after the ball. But they were having fun, and that's what mattered. Matt sat next to me, his wife Emily on his other side. Thanks for coming, he said quietly, but it means a lot to them, to us. Are you kidding? This is the highlight of my week. Remember when you helped me with that English paper? Sophomore year? Mockingbird, of course. I don't think I ever told you, but that was the first time I felt like you really saw me. Like I wasn't just your annoying little brother. He looked out at the field. Everything good in my life started from feeling like I mattered to my big sister. My throat tightened. You always mattered. I know, but that's when I felt it. Small moments. That's what I'd learned. Life wasn't built on grand gestures or dramatic revelations. It was built on showing up. On Sunday dinners and soccer games and helping with homework. On choosing to garden with your mother instead of meeting a boy who'd ruin your life. On choosing yourself over and over until you build something real. The twins scored a goal, unclear which team it was for, honestly, and we all cheered anyway. Daniel bought everyone overpriced hot dogs from the concession stand. Emily tried to convince Matt that their daughter definitely had Olympic potential based on one good kick. We laughed until our sides hurt. This was my life. The one I'd chosen, brick by brick, choice by choice. That night, lying in bed next to Daniel, I thought about Jake Mitchell sitting in a jail cell. I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful. I felt nothing at all. He was a stranger who'd hurt people I'd never met, a footnote in someone else's story. In my first life, he'd been everything. He'd defined my choices, consumed my time, destroyed my relationships. He'd made me miss my mother's death. In this life, he was no one. A man I'd never introduced to anyone because I'd never met him at all. You okay? Daniel mumbled, half asleep. Perfect, I said, and meant it. I built my firm into one of the most respected investment consultancies on the West Coast. We specialized in helping women and marginalized founders secure funding, breaking down the old boys networks that had controlled venture capital for decades. It was work that mattered, work that changed lives. At 45, I was invited to speak at Berkeley's graduation. I stood at the same podium where I'd received my own diploma 23 years earlier, looking out at a sea of young faces. I'm going to tell you something that might sound strange, I said. The most important decision of your life might be the thing you choose not to do. The job you don't take, the relationship you don't pursue, the opportunity you turn down because your gut tells you it's wrong. I paused, thinking about a country club job I'd declined at 16. We spend so much time talking about seizing opportunities. But wisdom is also knowing when to walk away, when to protect your peace, when to choose yourself, even when it feels selfish. I told them about gardening with my mother, about learning finance from my father, about building relationships slowly, carefully, with intention, about the difference between intensity and intimacy, between someone who wants to possess you and someone who wants to know you. Some of you will meet people who make you feel special by making you small, I said, who love bomb you and then isolate you, who need you so much that you stop having room for yourself. When that happens, and it probably will, because these people are good at what they do, I want you to remember something. I gripped the podium. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. The right people will celebrate your light, not demand that you dim it for their comfort. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of students came up to talk to me. One girl, maybe 21, waited until everyone else had left. That thing you said, she started nervous, about people who make you feel special by making you small, I think I'm in that relationship right now. Tell me about it, I said. She did. And I heard echoes of my first life in every sentence. The boyfriend who needed constant attention, who got upset when she made plans with friends, who borrowed money he never repaid, who made her feel like his problems were her responsibility. What should I do? She asked. What do you want to do? Leave. But I keep thinking maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. He says he loves me so much, and that's why he needs me around all the time. I took her hands. Listen to me. That feeling in your gut, the one telling you something's wrong, that's not sensitivity. That's wisdom. Trust it. She was crying now. What if I regret it? What if he was the one and I threw it away? Then you'll meet someone else who's also the one, except they'll want you to have friends and hobbies and a life outside them. They'll be proud of your success instead of threatened by it. They'll show up when you need them. I thought of Daniel, who'd rescheduled surgery to be at my mother's funeral, who'd celebrated every one of my promotions like it was his own, who'd never once asked me to be smaller. The right person is never the one who makes you choose between them and yourself, said. The right person helps you become more of who you are. She hugged me, thanked me, left. I hoped she listened. Hoped she chose herself. Not everyone did. A year later, I got an email from her. She'd stayed with him for another 6 months until he'd cheated on her with one of her friends, but she'd left, survived, and was now thriving at a new job across the country. Thank you for planting the seed, she wrote. Even though I didn't water it right away, it eventually grew. I smiled. Gardening metaphors. Mom would have loved that. Dad died peacefully at 78, 10 years after Mom. He'd remarried, a lovely woman named Patricia who made him laugh, and had spent his retirement traveling, volunteering, being Grandpa Dave to Matt's kids and eventually my own. Yes, my own. Daniel and I adopted twin girls when I was 47. Late by most standards, but we'd waited until we were ready, until we had the time and resources and emotional bandwidth to be the parents we wanted to be. Lily and Sophie were 6 when they came to us, already full of personality and opinions. They'd been through trauma in their biological family, and they needed patience and consistency and love without conditions. We're so lucky to have you, I told them on their first night in our house, tucking them into beds we'd let them pick out themselves. Our old mom said that too, Lily said quietly, but then she changed her mind. My heart broke. People can be really lucky and still mess up, but Daniel and I were choosing you on purpose. We did mountains of paperwork and waited years for you. You're not a backup plan or a maybe. You're our daughters. Sophie, bolder than her sister, asked, what if we're bad? What if you decide you don't want us anymore? Not possible, Daniel said from the doorway. What ties? We're family now. Family doesn't do returns. It took 2 years for them to believe us. 2 years of showing up, over and over, of staying calm through tantrums and meltdowns, of proving that we meant what we said. And then one day, Lily came home from school and said, I told my teacher about my mom, you, helping me with my science project. And it felt true. Small moments. That's how trust was built. On my 50th birthday, my family threw a surprise party. Everyone was there. Dad and Patricia, Matt and Emily and the teenage twins, Sarah and her husband, Daniel's entire extended family, colleagues from the firm, friends from college I'd stayed close to. "Speech!" someone called out. I stood, wineglass in hand, looking at all these faces. People I'd chosen and who'd chosen me back. 20 years ago, I said, and I made a choice that seemed small at the time. I decided to spend a summer gardening with my mother instead of taking a job that would have led me down a completely different path. I saw Dad's face change, remembering his words at Mom's funeral. That choice rippled out in ways I couldn't have imagined. It taught me to be present, to value the right things, to build my life with intention instead of just letting things happen to me. I raised my glass. So, here's to the choices we make, the jobs we don't take, the relationships we walk away from, the moments we show up for, the slow, careful work of building a life worth living. Here's to the people who love us enough to let us be ourselves. And here's to becoming someone who deserves that love. We drank, and I felt the weight of 2 lifetimes settle into one. The girl I'd been, desperate and lost. The woman I'd become, careful and free. That night, after everyone left, I stood in my garden. The one I'd built in this house, an echo of the one I'd created with Mom so many years ago. Roses bloomed in the moonlight, their scent heavy and sweet. Daniel found me there. "What you thinking about?" "Everything, nothing." I leaned into him. How lucky I am." "We're the lucky ones," he said. "Me and the girls." "No," I said. "I'm lucky I learned how to choose people who say things like that and mean it." Inside, I could hear the girls laughing at something on TV. Dad and Patricia were staying over, probably already in bed. Matta had promised to come back tomorrow for leftover cake. This was my life. No grand revenge, no dramatic confrontation, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd built something real. I'd never introduced Jake Mitchell to anyone. Not because I was hiding something, but because he simply didn't exist in my world. I'd erased him with a single choice at 16, and everything beautiful in my life had grown from that erasure. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't punishment. It was living well. Was building a life so full of love and meaning that the person who would have destroyed it became irrelevant. Was choosing yourself so completely that you became unrecognizable to your own worst timeline. I was 50 years old, standing in a garden I'd planted with my own hands, surrounded by people I'd chosen to love and who'd chosen me back. I had daughters who called me mom and meant it. I had work that mattered. I had Sunday dinners and soccer games and inside jokes, and the comfortable intimacy of a 20-year marriage built on actual partnership. I had everything Jake Mitchell would have taken from me, if I'd let him. But I hadn't. I'd chosen better. And that, in the end, was the only revenge that mattered. The moon rose higher. Somewhere in the house, someone started making popcorn. I could smell it. The girls called for Daniel to help them with something. Life, normal and beautiful, and mine. I took one last look at the roses, Mom's favorite, the ones we'd planted together that transformative summer, and went inside to my family, to the life I'd built, to the choices that had made me free.